Good evening. You're listening live to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. With me tonight is RDV. We are discussing Kung Fu, the old show versus the new. Obviously, RDV and Professor Pixel have been covering the CW version of the reimagined Kung Fu series. And backstage, we got into a little bit of a debate about some of the pluses and minuses of the old Kung Fu versus the new, whether things are PC, woke versus authentic versus how action-oriented it is, and whether or not they're watchable. So tonight we just wanted to flesh those differences out because it seems like there's a very passionate fan base of people like me for the old Kung Fu who've yet to see the new one, but then people that have seen the new one, like RDV, who loves all things action and has some positive and maybe some negative things to say about it. So RDV, let me just turn it over to you first. Since you haven't really seen the original Kung Fu, except for maybe the first couple of episodes, which I know you're more than a big fan of. Talk about what made you and Professor Pixel decide to watch the rebooted CW version of Kung Fu, and what y'all's initial take was after the first review of the episode, which, by the way, everyone can listen to here on the Xtreme Movie Show.
I'm just gonna. Well, the reason we wanted to watch it because, well, it's a new CW show, and we are covering pretty much all the other CW shows on his channel over there, called I Love Puppets. So it's Kung Fu, and I wanted to see how what they're going to do with it. You know, how bad it's going to be. What's going to be like, you know, like Cobra Kai is good in a sense because it focuses on Johnny, but like, can you imagine if Cobra Kai was only based on just the kids and there wasn't adults? You know, it was just high school, and that's what
would not like it.
No, exactly, and that's what I was afraid this was going to go into, but this kept with a different spin on the story. Instead of like doing the same thing like they did with, you know, with Kane, where he wandered, you know, throughout the United States, well, you know, every episode helping out people. You know, this is more as a focal point where her master, it's a girl, basically girl went to it's CW, and take it with a grain of salt because, you know, everything on CW, it has to have a certain agenda or certain things. So I'm not going to come out and say it's directly woke. I'm just going to say it feels like it's aimed more towards girls, but maybe some guys too for the show. The new show is just basically a girl who was tricked by her mom into leaving college, going to China because, you know, they're Chinese family, very, very proud, traditional, to go there and just basic, you know, cultural awakening, you know, to learn more about her history and all that stuff. So she went on there, and she found out the place where she was supposed to go turned out to be her mom had arranged a marriage for her. She was upset, she panicked, and she left. Along the way, she met a woman. This woman basically sensed her distraught, you know, and basically, you know, they formed a bond. Flash forward, they're basically, she's brought into a temple. Now, I will admit, from what I saw of the first series, I like the fact that each master had their own, you know, there was several masters. They each had their own different fighting technique. This felt like this one, it was basically, there's only one master, and what turns out this master was all the whole school was actually they're protecting a sword that's basically part of another group of sacred items or weapons that if someone gets control of all of them, they could be basically become immortal or, you know, or basically unstoppable with immense power. So that's basically the subplot, the main plot. But after her little village, you know, or where she's at, they're in a remote temple, and it's located nowhere. Or it's basically on a giant freaking mountain, like you expect. Like if you read comics or you just read anything, where up in the Himalayas, there's always like a remote location where it's impossible to get to, and
inaccessible by others.
Yeah, yes.
Only the strong shall be able to overcome the obstacles to get us to the
yeah.
Look, I haven't seen the show, so I don't know. But are you saying the sword thing is like this mystical thing?
Yes, there's a mystical, supernatural element to the show. They threw that in there for underlying plot. So her master's killed, the sword's stolen, she's branded by the sword. She's got her, like, you know, basically imprints from the sword. She goes back on her hand.
Okay.
Yeah, because she grabbed the sword, you know, and the girl who's stealing the sword basically said, "You're not strong enough. You're too weak. The whole can control the power," and that's why she burned. This girl basically kicks her off the mountain. And thinks that she's dead, but she's clinging to the mountain. So it's basically like several months later. after an effortless trying to find the person to kill their master, she goes back to San Francisco to confront her parents because she basically cut off contact with them for 3 years. Getting there, she basically gets into a tiff because she finds out her parents have been basically making a deal with the triad. Because
not the tongs, but the triads.
The triads, because they're the restaurant and there's basically a racket going around. These triads basically extorting money from everybody around the town, little village, and the cops are on the payroll too. So the first episode is basically about her accumulating back to getting back to her normal life. And also she meets someone who actually studies ancient Chinese lore and all stuff, and she goes to him. So it's possible a new love interest for her, but yeah, she takes her and her brother go down, and they end up getting enough evidence on this guy because the cops are kind of incompetent because they only have one translator, which I thought was kind of weak. But overall, they find out more information about the sword, and they find out that's actually just one of many of like 9 or 8 elemental swords. That basically the combined whatever. It's like I said, it's something new. It's a little more faster paced. It's not as much teen drama as I expected it to be, for being on CW, because I feel like CW shows are aimed more towards women than guys, and that's kind of been true because that's kind of been what the WB's kind of been all along. It started off with shows like Felicity, name,
stuff.
Yeah. So I was curious. Okay, what are they going to do with this? Are they going to make it really bad? Because I've seen shows on the CW where it's just god awful. Batwoman being one of them. Supergirl is really woke, and I hate using the term woke. When I mean by woke, I mean preachy, where it has nothing to do with the show. The show they're taking a character that somebody likes and using it to just spread information that's against that talks down towards a certain group of people. And all I want is a show. That's all anybody wants. If you're a fan of these shows, you just want to watch a show where you escape reality. You don't want to about all this crap.
Well, unfortunately, that's
why I was
at all these days with anything.
I know. So I said, it's like anything you watch, take with a grain of salt. Well,
you guys are covering it, so that's the interesting thing, because when we had discussed it and you guys told me what your selection was going to be, I was curious because I thought I'd only heard about them rebooting. I didn't realize it was already pretty much in the bag and going live, because I was always a huge fan of the original.
Yeah, apparently this is like the 3rd attempt. This is finally got approved.
Well, the point is that, some of the pluses and minuses is what we want to debate. And I think that for you guys watching it, you guys, Professor Pixel's the young one out of the group. You're kind of in that middle category, and I'm a little older than both of you. So we have a different perspective from it, because I grew up watching the old Kung Fu. So let's just jump right into what they're doing now versus the way they did it before. And let's kind of debate some of these points. So the first one I wanted to bring up is the fact that, okay, you've had recently, for lack of a better term, Asian representation being a focal point for some people on TV. And so you had that show Crazy Rich Asians, which is supposed to have been sent here in Orlando, Florida, just west of Orlando, Florida, in Pine Hills, at the Pine Hills Palace, where I'm broadcasting live from. I remember the show being on when my wife had it on, and I was looking at it going, oh, they're supposed to be in Orlando? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, it looks nothing like it, because there's mountains in the background and everything. It's just, I guess that's just talk. So one, that's offensive to me, even though it was a comedy sort of show, but whatever. That's how weak Hollywood is these days with filming things. But they rebooted with a mostly Asian crew. I don't have an issue with that. The original show, obviously, David Carradine knew nothing about martial arts and was a white guy, but he was from a Carradine family, which has a very long, rich history in Hollywood. So the only grousing people have about it is though, oh, a white guy played it. Now they wrote it into the story that he was a half and half and everything.
Yeah, yes.
So it didn't bother me in the original version. The only thing that might have bothered Asians at the time was the fact that, well, Bruce Lee apparently allegedly pitched a show that this is remarkably similar to, and he auditioned for it, but didn't get it. Whatever. Who knows? That's politics. Do you have a problem with the fact that it's an old Asian crew, basically?
No, I don't. But the original show, what triggered me is the very first couple minutes. Within the first 10 minutes, he's walking through endlessly the basically through the desert, and you keep getting these flashbacks. They blink, and they blink again, and then it goes. It's like, man, it does this, keeps doing it. It's like, it just drives me nuts. I don't like the blinking. Just transition, have him remember, and just have like fade out and then go.
Well, let's just jump right into that, because I think that's really the major meat and potatoes of the difference between the old show and the new show, besides some obvious ones that most people who are aware of both can figure out. The original show, it's a Western show. It is a spiritual show above all things, where what you're talking about, these flashbacks go back to when he's had his time at the temple with Master Po, and they're talking about a particular concept. So it was a way of taking Eastern philosophy, putting it over here and on television, which is totally different. So it was a very slow, deliberately paced show, where for the most part, the template we've always talked about on Kicking It, our action channel here on the Extreme Movie Show, we talked about the Chuck Norris template, where a little bit of action, a little bit here and there, and then one big boom, you finish strong with a nice roundhouse kick at the end and you're done, where there was restraint. Because David Carradine didn't necessarily know martial arts and learned them along the way, of course, there wasn't a lot of it, and it wasn't overdone in terms of gratuity or violence. It wasn't. It was really about Kane being forced into a situation that he would have to look at through the lens philosophically of what he was going up, understand what the challenge was going to be, and stay consistent with what his beliefs were. And it's great, because if you go on YouTube now and you see scenes like, Kane versus a jerk, you see him ordering like beans and rice and a thing and having to beat somebody up, but he doesn't want to. In the whole original show, all these flashbacks that you're talking about goes on to whatever they're mentioning. Now, I don't know this because I don't watch it, but I'll ask you point blank. Does the new show that you guys started watching and reviewing have anything like that at all? No.
Probably not.
So I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, but I'm going to say, for me, I appreciate that with the old one. That's what makes it very unique. So I'm not going to say it's a negative for the new show, but it automatically makes me feel like it's watering it down a little bit.
We've only had one episode too. I mean, I'm trying to. The next episode apparently airs Thursday nights. So Thursday nights on the CW.
And it's hard to do that off of one episode, so I'm not trying to paint it all in the corner.
No.
Because that's how these things go. But one of the things you mentioned that you thought was a strong plus, which, again, not having seen the episode, I can only go by the extended trailer that I've seen, was the actual action itself. So was that a plus or a minus to you?
I thought it was pretty good, and because this has been brought up before, too, by Angleton and by several other people who watch Arrow, whenever the people go to fight, they run towards each other like the X-Men cartoons, and then they fight. Mm-hmm. They don't do that in this. If anything, it felt actually kind of refreshing. What's cool is actually when she fights against people and you hear it won't snap, which is really different from most of these shows we watch on the CW. I've never heard anybody get their arm snap or face kick, punch, and you hear a snap or crunch.
Right.
That, man, there's no gore where our bones sticking out, but you definitely hear it snap. I was like, wow, it's like they're actually going with that, because it's kind of like more you'd see like in an actual martial arts stuff movie, what was that, Ravager? I think it was Revenger. That's what it was. Bruce Kahn, you see people getting their arms snap, and you actually hear the crunch, and then you see the bone stick out. This is just without the gore. So that was interesting for me.
But you said there was a lot of action in this episode, correct?
There's a few parts where they're looking, or they're trying to take down the triad, but the few fight scenes, there's at least 3 fight scenes in this. Oh. There's one at the end, one in the very beginning, during the raid, and then there's one in the middle when she's taking on the triad goons in front of this 99-cent shop, where they're trying to shake down some people. I mean, like I said, it's not like her brother is gay, but it's not a big focus of the actual show. They're not showing him going around.
But it checks the box.
Yeah, but that's pretty much any show, and that's not just.
I don't disagree with you on that.
Yeah. It's not just
checks the box, though.
Yeah, it's all right. It doesn't bother me. It's like I said, if It's not like you're watching Supergirl and it's all about like, oh, hey, I'm Alex, I'm gay, or the whole episode is focused on her like, I like this girl. And it's like, no one cares.
Yeah.
We're here to watch Supergirl. We're not here to talk to somebody who doesn't exist in the comics.
So I think that this particular topic is a push because, like I said, the original show is a Western and it's a philosophical show. It's not about action at all. So you don't get hardly any action. You might get one or two little bits of action, maybe one thing at the in the third act, which is pretty much how it sounds like this show, the current new show is doing. It's just more stylized version of it is there. So I can understand it if people say, well, the action, cinematography, and fight scenes are considered better in the current updated version. But that being said, from what I've seen from the trailer, I don't particularly like the slow motion stuff, the Matrix style stuff. I think that's garbage. I think it's crap. It's nice for what it is, but again, you get desensitized to it the more you see it. And like I say, in the original show, you get very little of it. It's more about the setup and the situation that Kane is in. Because the only thing that's really different as far as the backstory is he actually murders the guy that was going to kill the temple, and there's a price on his head. So he goes to look for his brother in America, and so that makes him go week to week, chasing his brother down from town to town and being involved in situations and stuff. So this one, they don't really put that on her, so she's got a much easier way to have to deal with things, I think, too. So I don't know how serious they're going to take the whole murder kind of part, or if something were to happen later on.
Well,
in the
show. The other interesting part is in this show, in the first episode, she's seeing like premonitions of visions of her master, like, and the way I describe it is that she's not crazy, but it's kind of, it feels more like a Star Wars thing when they like the Force, you can still see them, they guide you, and all that. I mean, if it's a supernatural element, because her master was killed by the sword that's supposed to be like enchanted.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe because she's burned, maybe she's able to see her master because some of the power went into her from the sword.
I'm going to tell you this right off the bat here. I've attempted to watch. I did watch the Hardy Boys reboot. I think it was on Hulu, the 13 episode thing. They captured the spirit of the original. Well, I should say the 70s show with Parker, Sean Cassidy and Parker Stevenson. Thank you, Rob. And so it was mildly successful in that, but then you also had the Nancy Drew reboot, which I've only seen one or two episodes, and they introduced a super element too, and it's almost nothing like what Nancy Drew is supposed to be, so I think that's a fail. And I'm not saying it's not a watchable show, but the problem with a show being rebooted or reimaged or whatever you want to call it is that, to me, it's supposed to retain the element of what made the original good, and that's why we've seen so many reboots flop and fail, because they don't do it. Like the Equalizer and a bunch of shows you've talked about.
Like I said, it's too early to speak because this is a different world we're living in now, especially with COVID. Normally, when CW puts a show on for the summer, it's a show they expect is not going to last or get renewed. So it's interesting because they're throwing this also on there too, as long as they're going to have Stargirl is their season 2 debuting during the summer,
right?
Because usually pre-COVID. No one's watching TV during the summer. Summer break, people are gone. They're doing other things. They're out having fun. They're boating. They're fishing. They're camping. All that stuff. No one's really in watching TV. That's why they usually put stuff for the fall and spring. So I'm curious to see if this show will be renewed or just be kind of thrown away. Because I've seen other shows kind of like this that were semi alright that just got tossed.
Well, despite the massive drop in ratings the Equalizer got. It has really nothing in common with the original show, much this one really doesn't. That one got renewed, so I think for PC purposes, you can have some shows, if they're not very expensive, get renewed for a second season. It has nothing to say with the quality of the show.
But the thing is, though, this show hasn't been really preachy, though. Batwoman, reason it's been renewed because it's like Supergirl. It's spreading a message.
I'm not sure the Equalizer's preachy either. They don't.
But that's Equalizer CBS. CBS has so many different shows, so maybe that's why they're
television, though.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the sword. All I'm going to say is, I think the supernatural element is a negative for the show, and not that I've seen the episode. I understand wanting to watch the show because it's a young hot Asian, or it's a woman that's kicking ass, even though she's 120 pounds soaking wet and not believable in that sense. Maybe the choreography is good. Maybe the action scenes aren't shaky cam syndrome and all that. So maybe that's a positive point. But I think introducing a mystical sword, really, I just, that makes it almost a little childish to me, as opposed to what you said, where you thought, hey, it's not like a teen show so far, which was kind of interesting, but the spiritual element, do you really think it's a positive?
Actually, it is, because I figure, why not? I mean, everything else. What you don't like the Jackie Chan movies when he has to do with anything with spiritual elements or like that, because that's pretty much a part of like Chinese like TV shows and their fantasy, some of their their lore, their legend stuff. I actually enjoy that. I mean, I enjoy a lot of shows that are foreign based because they're not made by Hollywood.
I don't disagree with that.
No, but I do love the fantasy element.
Okay.
Because how many shows can you name that have fantasy element that are actually on TV right now that are in the United States?
Well, I wouldn't know, because I wouldn't bother looking at it, and I don't know how that point is relative.
Well, no, the point is relevant. The point is relevant. It's a niche that not many people have, are into as far as the U.S. So maybe that might be a negative towards the show, because maybe people aren't into that here in the United States. But outside, I watch a lot of that stuff, and I don't mind that. Like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a lot of wire work. And to me, that's the only thing I didn't like about that movie, was the wire work.
Agreed.
This has some wire work, obviously, when she does like the slow motion matrix, kind of when she jumps, does it. But other than that, it's actually like on the ground, like kicking and fighting stuff. So I mean, I prefer having something different. That's why I avoid, because otherwise we just get the same cookie cutter shows. I prefer to have something like this, on here, because, like I said, this is the only show I've known actually is fantasy based right now that it has anything to do with martial arts, and it's actually on prime time television.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll disagree on that one. You like it, I don't. I think it takes away from, the action part of it and everything too. And obviously, I guess one could argue, and again, one episode in, it's hard to say, that it's something where instead of Kane in the original show, being hunted and being, because Kane's a pacifist. Yeah. That's the whole point. Yeah. The fact is he's got a reason to be on the run, whereas with her, she's chasing something there too. So it's a little different in terms of the philosophy argument with what's going on with it too. But no, really that the sound of something like a magic sword and made me just roll my eyes.
She's not really, it wasn't really a Buddhist temple or like that. They were actually guarding the sword. That's the whole thing. And she was never really told, because she's only been there for 3 years, but she was never, it was the sword was actually hidden inside like a fountain, So they heard the legend. So as far as she knew, it was made up. It wasn't, the sword did not exist. So her master, with her last dying breath, said, "Avenge me, get the sword. It's, the fate of the world and all." So that's why she's so focused on it. She's not really going out picking fights. People are picking, but she will defend her siblings from people. That's with the Triad Gang. The first episode, her father had 72 hours to live, so they had to get evidence, and help the cops bring down this guy. They got enough evidence to come with the drugs, it's. You get at the last moment, is where she does the flying, kick. I've actually seen people do this too, where they jump up and they kick, twice,
Yeah, it's, like I say, I don't think I'll like it. I'll probably watch an episode or two, especially as you guys continue to review it. To me, the one thing I did like about the spiritual element of the first show is that, like I say, Kane was placed in situations where he had to rely on his philosophy and how to work himself through a situation, and it was dealing with people and stuff. It wasn't about action. It wasn't about chasing something mystical or guns or the typical stuff that we see on TV and movies all the time now these days.
No, he was a wandering Buddhist who threw like 3 kicks, or 1 kick if you're lucky, in an episode.
Agree, exactly, and I would argue that in itself makes it a more of a niche show than, say, something like this that combines something like Riverdale. Riverdale's got supernatural stuff going on, right?
That's Riverdale started off all right, and so once they entered, because the whole thing Riverdale, briefly, when they announced they're gonna have Chilling Tales of Sabrina, which was made by the same company on Netflix. All of a sudden, Riverdale is like, we're gonna do this, and everybody thought, are they gonna do a crossover? They never did a crossover because they are part of the same comic universe.
I know, and they will at some point.
But the reason I love this fantasy stuff because, well, I'm a comic book fan. You know, it's just stuff. You know, it's make believe. It's not meant to be like logic. You know, it's just where you let your mind just escape. You know, you don't have to watch something that has to make like 100% sense or be real. You know.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because we have a lot of people on this channel that are comic book fans, anime fans, and I'm not the biggest fan of those things. We've discussed that before, so I think that's a very valid point because this does remind me of a comic bookish type of adaptation as opposed to a more serious type one, like the original show. I don't know why it took 2, 3, 4 reboots. Maybe they wanted to get quote unquote the right people on because I guess a woman is the showrunner and wanted to put a female perspective, and that's interesting.
I think the reason they held it back because they had too many shows going on. They had Supernatural going. Supernatural is over. Yep. And then they had other stuff. So they're trying to push the Arrowverse. Now that Arrowverse ended, now they're making room for other shows to come in, and they finally like, you know what? They finally got the green light. Let's go with this. I don't know what they changed. I mean, I have to go and do some more research, but so far the first episode, it's fairly decent.
All right, so let's close on one small note.
And there's no Riverdale feeling to it.
Okay, for me, one of the most memorable things about the original Kung Fu was something you briefly touched on at the beginning, and it's the opening music. It's him wandering through the desert, whatever the flashbacks are, him walking on the rice paper and all the tests with him throwing the throwing stars, blocking the spears being thrown at him. I always popped for that as a kid, and today as an adult I still do, because it's not about action. It's not about kicking ass. It's about the feeling I got of the discipline he had to go through getting the shaved head, the whole pay your dues sort of thing just to learn something, and of course not practice it with remarkable self-restraint. I think is just tremendous that people don't want to explore because it's hard to do. But I have to say this, one of the absolute most baddest ass scenes in all of television is from Kung Fu, and it is from the opening credits. And it's how he chooses his particular style. I think it's Dragon and maybe another one. I don't know if on his forearms it's the same one or not. It's been a while. But when he does I'm going to put my left forearm, my right forearm on the side of the chamber of hot coals, lift that thing up, and then shove him out into the ice there. To this day, that's still one of the best scenes of all time on TV as a part of something. And it's cool. And you get the feeling that he definitely earned it. And I just thought that was so badass. So to me, I kind of mark out for that a little bit. Has there been anything in this first show that's really made you pop hard?
Like I said, the fact that it feels like a normal show. It doesn't feel like a CW show to begin with. It feels like I'm getting like a 90s, like Relic Hunter or early 2000s. They used to be on CW, or not CW, but the WB.
Right.
It feels like a low budget show. Well, maybe a little bit more than low budget because Relic Hunter was kind of low budget, but it was like I love shows like Thunders in Paradise. You know what that is? It's corny. I love that stuff. I love Relic Hunter because Relic Hunter was kind of like a ripoff of Tomb Raider.
Yep.
But and that had mystical elements to it as well. These are just fun like movies where you can just turn your brain off and just sit back and just enjoy something. And whether you like this or whether you like watching the original Kung Fu or even the sequel show, which took place after the TV movies, that was the 90s. That's the one I grew up on. Yes. So I mean, there's so much out there to TV right now. You can it's mind-boggling because right now not only can you can watch new stuff with other streaming, you can go back, you can watch old stuff. I mean. And I'm only turning 36. There's so much TV for like the past 60 years I've never watched or never heard of. So I'm constantly finding out, hearing about new stuff, new shows. And IMDb also helps out too. You can actually look through an actor's stuff, see what they've been in. If you like a certain actor, go back and watch your stuff. It's martial arts, man. Martial artists, all those guys, like those have like, you just go through their category. It's like, holy crap, is there so much I've never heard of the titles, and like especially if they're foreign. You may have watched it, but don't remember the name of the title. So that's why I just love how much access we have to new stuff, and I'm liking the new stuff. I mean, but if I don't like the new stuff, or even if I do like enough, I can go back and compare it to the original stuff, like we're doing right now. I can go back and watch that. Because man, before like I said, like the internet is, as much as people don't like it, it's good for something.
Well, I will say this: the original Kung Fu is one that has been discussed to actually review here live, season 1 on our Xtreme TV channel. I understand you're not a fan of it, so that
I've
might be
only watched.
something that later on we may do somehow, some way. But it's definitely on the short list. The current one, again, and this is why we do this. Is like Professor Pixel, the person that's reviewing the new Kung Fu with you on Friday nights when we drop it. He and I have been reviewing Twin Peaks, and it was something he said, I've heard about it, don't really know anything about it. I wanted to check it out, and he's really loving it and enjoying it. And for me, on a second pass, I haven't watched it in 30 years. I'm watching it going, oh my God, I forgot how good this was, but I remember how big it was. And so it's interesting to be able to discuss those pros and cons, because any Twin Peaks that's come out recently has been a continuation, where something like this is just basically we're going to rip off the original show and put it in a way that we want it to work. And I have no issues with that. People are allowed to do it and they can do it. But I don't want people to automatically assume that it's as good or better than the original because it's an updated version or it's got this kind of a cast or whatever. That's pure nonsense that, we try to avoid here on the Xtreme Movie Show. We just try to look at it for the merits. And that's why I appreciate the fact that you two are reviewing that show, because I looked at that and shook my head, went, oh, come on. It's got to be another Equalizer. And whether people don't mind the shows on the CW or think the CW's full of hate and really screws up a lot of shows, watch it, have an opinion about it, and then we discuss it. And that's what we're doing with this here tonight. So definitely something I think is going to be interesting to talk about a little bit more going further as people watch a second or third episode, because it's like everything, that second and third week of a movie, when it gets the huge drop off in terms of ticket sales, that really tells a lot about how it's going. We've seen it with the Equalizer get, really horrible ratings after the initial bump and all the press for it. We'll see if the same thing happens here with Kung Fu. And Kung Fu might be something that turns into something that's enjoyable, but it may, in a couple episodes, to your point, turn something where you go, hey, I wasn't expecting this. This is better, or I don't know about that. So anyway, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for popping in there. Old Kung Fu versus new Kung Fu. Thanks to RDV and Professor Pixel for reviewing it. Let me ask you this, RDV. Is it Friday that the next episode is going to drop?
Well, this show drops on Thursdays.
I'm saying your show.
My show, after I edit it, there's no really guarantee as far as Fridays, because we record it on Fridays.
Saturday.
So it'll probably be Saturday, Sunday by the latest.
Yeah, this weekend, definitely. We're trying to get that out as soon as we can. So, it definitely generated some feedback, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to cover old versus new today. And it's an age-old argument, no matter what field you're talking about, movies, music, tastes, style, old versus new, which is better. I'm old school. RDV's like new school. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. Check that show out. Check out the Twin Peaks review. Check out the other stuff we have there. If there's something you'd like for us to take a look at and offer our extreme views, let us know in the comments below. I'm your host, Rob, for RDV and everybody else. Thanks for listening. As always, stay extreme.
Xtreme!
Extreme Fu. As Kane would say, I am just a man.
Kung Fu you.